Good morning. I'm Craig Finstead, one of the pastors here at the Water's Edge. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. I see people all over the country who are watching, and it's a beautiful day here in Omaha, but wherever you are, just hope it's a blessed Sunday, and thank you for spending the first part of your day with us. Now, we're in a series called House Church, and I would say this: the majority of your best moments in your life have happened with other people. You know, God has not created us to live in isolation, but with each other. So in the second book of the Bible, God says it is not good for people to live alone. Ecclesiastes, which is full of wisdom, it gives us another look. He says that two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. Now, these messages are for house churches. They're going to help us live together better. And we want to live as small groups, life groups, house churches. We want to live better together. They're going to strengthen existing groups, and they're also going to create small communities and new friendships, new house churches. Now, the Water's Edge, we started out as a small group. We used to be a church where most people were in some sort of life group community. You know, with all the money we needed to raise and the building we had to build, relentlessly supporting all the missions that we support, we did lose some focus. Now, the pandemic is reteaching us that we need each other more than ever. Our culture is reteaching us that the world needs Jesus more than ever. Now, House Church is a movement within the Water's Edge that will be done in 5 weeks. The sermon series will be done in 5 weeks, but I want to let you know this. We are devoting this time to laying the foundation for house churches to be strengthened existing ones, and then creating and building new house churches. And this won't end in 5 weeks. This is going to be a constant project for us. You know, my dream is that most of us, a couple years down the road, are going to be involved in some type of house church community. Now, these messages are also going to be for anybody who is in any sort of relationship, and that is going to be everybody. We're all learning and experiencing during these next 5 weeks, how it is that we can care for each other, how it is that we can pray for each other, how we can play together, how we can serve together, how we can give together, how we can grow in our faith together, how we can forgive together. Now all of these this morning are going to be, just absolutely essential for who we become as people. So there's an old axiom that exists, and it's absolutely true. Show me the quality of your relationships, and you're going to show me the quality of your life. Our life is consisting of the interpersonal relationships that we're involved in. Now, this morning we're going to look at a popular phrase, and you've said this phrase before. I've said it before as well. It can mean different things, can it? And the phrase is, I don't care. So when you say I don't care, that can mean different things in different contexts. One of the contexts is it like we have absolutely no preference. So you ask the question, what do you want for dinner tonight? And the other person says, I don't care. So that means all of a sudden like pizza or sushi or burgers or pork chops, whatever, is acceptable because the person has no preference. So when they say I don't care, it means I don't have any preference. Now, the second way that we can say I don't care is really kind of like out of like frustration. It's like it's almost like we're quitting. It's like I don't care about this dumb job anymore. I don't care what grade I get on this paper. I just need to get it done. Or you could say like I don't care who wins this dumb election. It just needs to be like over with yesterday. Now, the third way we can look at the phrase I don't care. It means something different altogether. And it's kind of like this. I don't care. I'm going to do whatever it takes. This is so important that I don't care what it costs me. This is going to happen. This is like something I've always dreamed of, and I don't care how many resources I use. I'm going to finish like this project. Yes, I got an email on Thursday, and it was from a family that's really been coming here, since we've been at Russell Middle School, all 15 years, and they're in their 70s. He asked me if I would, come over the house. Now there's a hospice situation that's going on here, and if he asked me to come, it's means that they really want to see me. And at this point, this family's been so generous to me. They've been so good to the church. This woman is like just a true fighter. So what I said when I was contacted by him is like, I don't care. I don't care about my to-do list. I don't care about the schedule that I'm looking at. I don't care that my son needs a ride home from football. I'm going to go see this woman. I don't care, whatever it takes. Now, after moving a couple tasks around on my Things 3 app and rescheduling something for tomorrow and finding David a pro bono Uber ride home from Russell Middle School, I made the trek to their house. Now, I think it'd be really cool. I think it'd be really cool if the Water's Edge, a collection of house churches, as a collection of families and individuals, use the phrase, I don't care, tens of thousands of times over the next decade as we love each other the best that we possibly can. Now, this morning, I'm going to look at 4 I don't care statements that are going to guide us as we care for each other. This can happen in a small group context. It can happen for those who aren't in house churches. And I would want to challenge all of us, this is the way that we can act to our community, because this is the way that Jesus acted to his community. Now, phrase number 1 is this: I don't care what it costs me, I'm not going to leave your side. So for those of you who are writing this down at home, I don't care what it costs me, I'm not going to leave your side. Now, all these are going to be on our website as well later this morning on the house church page of our website, weomaha.com. Now, one of the things I've noticed in life, even like today, I see this a lot. We've seen this throughout history, and that is that beauty often emerges from tragedy. So Ruth was a young woman. Her young husband had died. It was unexpected. No one saw it coming. They didn't have kids yet. So Ruth had a mother-in-law whose name was Naomi. Now, Naomi was living in Moab with Ruth and her husband. At this point, Naomi had no reason to stick around. Ruth would probably most likely move on to another young man who would take care of her until the end of her days. Naomi was going to, head back to Israel. Her son was going to be her life insurance, or her, old age insurance, the one that takes care of her. But that didn't work out. That's the way it worked in those times. But he died before she did. Now, Naomi, out of love, said, Ruth, I'm going to go back to Israel, and I'll figure things out there. And then Ruth, do you know what she actually said? She didn't say these words exactly, but she looked at Naomi and she said, I don't care what it costs me. I'm not going to leave your side. Now, she had absolutely no obligation to do this. When we love others, there's no obligation for us to do so. Naomi told Ruth, no, it's for your best. Marry a young man here in Moab. Take care of yourself. I'll go back to Israel, and things are going to be okay. And then Ruth, in chapter 1, verses 16 and 17, she says what I believe are some of the most beautiful words ever spoken. This is in the Bible. This is in any other of the 1,000 books I've read in my lifetime. She says to Naomi, so Ruth, the widow of Naomi's son, says, don't urge me to leave you or turn my back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. So the 2 women, they moved to Israel together. Now, Ruth ended up finding a man, Boaz. He wasn't young. he was an older guy, but he was very kind, and he loved Ruth. Ruth and Boaz, they got married. They had a son, Obed. You know who took care of Obed? It was Grandma Naomi. So Ruth and Boaz, they took care of Naomi. They didn't forget her. Then at a time, Obed had a son named Jesse. Jesse ended up having 7 sons. And you know the youngest of the 7 sons of Jesse. You may not know until I tell you, but you know his name. His name was David. He was the greatest king that Israel ever had. Now with Ruth as his great-grandmother and Naomi as his grandfather's caretaker, it's hardly a wonder at all that David became the man that he became, because he had this example of these 2 women who didn't give up on each other. All because Ruth said this simple phrase, I don't care what it costs me, I'm not going to leave your side. So we're going to look at an example of this in one of our house churches here at the Water's Edge.
Well, about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and it was immediate. Our small group just began supporting us through prayer and just walking with us. And then as I was getting treatment, they reached out and wanted to bring meals to us. And my first response was, no, we're fine. We can do this. But they insisted, and we learned so much from that. We learned that, as we received from them, we also grew closer together. And then it kind of spiraled, because then it was just a springboard that as other members of our group have had joys or concerns, then we know we're right there to support them.
Well, the care they showed for me was just, cooking the meals, because I always cook the meals, which was awesome to not have that on my plate. But I remember one time they picked up the kids and they took them to something. It was practice for Philip or Elizabeth something, but that was like hands-on. We'll take this off your plate. You don't need to worry about it. Just take care of your wife, be there for her, and do what you need to do. So yeah, they just did a ton of things, and they kind of did it sometimes without asking. Sometimes if you ask people if they need care, they're going to tell you no, because nobody wants to feel needy. So sometimes you just have to take that first step and just tell them, hey, I'm going to do this for you, and just follow through on it. I think we do a lot of things together. We play together. We got together a couple Friday nights ago and had a social distance gathering in the backyard. So we're doing everything we can to try to continue to stay close. We're all about in the same age group. So empty nesters and that type of thing. So we have a lot in common. Well, I think one of the biggest things is caring for one another is biblical. It goes back to Jesus and he talking to his disciples, and he said, love one another. So just as I have loved you, love one another. And by showing this love to one another, you show people that you're my disciples. So I think it's something like when he talks about love, it's a verb. He's saying you need to care for one another. You need to love one another. So I think it's, starting from that structure, it's like this is what we're called as Christians to do for one another in the church or outside of the church. So that, I think that's the foundation for it, that, we're just following the command that Jesus asked us to do in the first place.
Now here's the dream. The dream is that the Water's Edge becomes a bunch of people who are committed to each other, like Ruth is committed to Naomi. The dream is that all of us at the Water's Edge, like we as a church, have somebody, or even better yet, some buddies, who like Ruth, who like the Ely's house church, are going to say a phrase like this: I don't care what it costs me. I'm not going to leave your side. Now let's look at number 2. Number 2 is this: I don't care about my preferences. I'm going to treat everybody with compassion and respect. So I believe that respect is a forgotten virtue. Our culture lost this one somewhere in the last decade and a half. It never used to be this way. So when I say care, I think many of us are automatically kind of defaulting to really people who are going through some physical stuff, or maybe a huge relational breakdown or ending. But I would say that caring for healthy people is essential as well. there's an old phrase, and it's so true. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, Christ's compassion, it was universal. And this led him, this compassion, it led him to a place of respect for all humanity. Now, I think the toughest teaching of Jesus is found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6. So he had just healed a man, just shortly before this, and it was on a Sabbath. And there were some religious leaders who were just furious about this. Now, before you think this is kind of ridiculous of the religious leaders to be furious about Jesus healing a person on a Sabbath, I want to challenge you a little bit, because I think that you probably get a little frustrated too when some of your assumptions of life are challenged. So here's what I think is probably the most challenging teaching that Jesus gives us. So in Luke chapter 6, verses 32 through 35, Jesus says, if you only love those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to only those who do good to you, why should you get credit? Even sinners do that much. Now here's, in just these seven words, 2 sentences, I think here's his most challenging teaching. Jesus says, love your enemies, do good to them. Just let that sink in for a second. Love your enemies, do good to them. Now, when Jesus says love your enemy, here's what he's not saying. He's not saying, okay, when you see your enemy at a distance, like have this warm, tingly sensation in your heart. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, I don't care about my preferences. Therefore, I'm going to treat everybody with compassion and respect. So we're going to go back to one verse before this. So I started in verse 32. Now, verse 31 is one of the most well-known scriptures in all the Bible. In fact, most non-believers, non-Christians, people that aren't really even aware of this worldview, they would know this is the golden rule. This is from Jesus when he says, do to others as you would like them to do to you. So I'm going to read like 2 more translations of this because I like both these. Sometimes like words just become like so familiar that they don't have as much meaning. And I want to give us 2 alternative translations. Treat others as you want to be treated. And I really like this one. It's a little bit more wordy, but Eugene Peterson, who's the author of The Message, I think he does a really good job with this one. Ask yourself what you want people to do. Then grab the initiative and do it for them. So let's look at Jesus and how he lived this out. He just didn't say these words, like he totally lived it out. So it was the Pharisees that were giving Jesus a hard time here. And let's look how Jesus treated the Pharisees. He treated them with compassion and respect. Jesus did not treat the Pharisees poorly. What Jesus did to them is out of love, he asked them some very deep, insightful, penetrating questions. But there was never a time that Jesus did not treat them with compassion and respect. Like, look at the end of the Gospels where creation turned on the Creator, where, the fans of Jesus all of a sudden became his biggest critics. What did Jesus say about them? What did Jesus say about the people, even specifically, who killed him? Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He put his preferences aside for something far more important, and that's treating people with respect and great compassion. So you've heard stories of my grandpa Adolf before. He moved here from Norway, was an immigrant. Grandpa had a best friend. His name was Paul Mefford. So they lived across the street for a long time, and then Paul moved to a different part of the little town we lived in. The grandpa and Paul were undoubtedly best friends. So these 2 men were as opposite gets. They always had a running joke that Grandpa was a Norwegian and Paul was a Swede. Grandpa was a Democrat and Paul was a Republican. Grandpa was a blue-collar worker. Paul was an inventor. Paul was a somebody in this town. He owned probably the largest business in the town. So they were certainly different people. They love to fish together. I used to love to go fishing with Grandpa and Paul. They would just argue. These two men who didn't agree on politics. They didn't agree on much of anything at all. They absolutely loved each other. There was respect. There was compassion. When Grandma Elva got breast cancer, who was at the door first before anybody else? It was Paul Mefford. These men, they helped raise each other's kids. Paul had 7 kids. He moved to this really cool house on the edge of the city. He built it, and he had an oak tree in the front of the house. 7 oak trees for one for each of the 7 kids. And Grandpa Adolf would have known those as his own kids, and Paul would have known my dad and his brother as his kids. And these two men, who didn't really have a lot in common, they loved each other. Now, sometimes you learn about God from reading the Bible. Sometimes you learn about it from the testimony of others. And sometimes you learn about God and you learn about life from observing others. And Grandpa and Paul taught me one of those lessons one day. And Grandpa, even later in life, his English was never that good. I could understand him. The family could understand him. The friends could understand him. But people who didn't talk to him just didn't understand him very well. He would still have some Norwegian words in there. I would say his English was decent, but definitely, not fluent. And there was a young man that lived in this kind of 3-story house across the street. It was a rental property, so probably, 3, 4, 5, units. Some of the basement, some up top, some of the main floors. And this guy would always make fun of Grandpa's accent. And he would say some things that were very, very unkind to Grandpa. Now, one day I was sitting outside with Grandpa and Paul, and this young man was not able to get his car started. He cranked for a second and it wouldn't go. And what I saw next was just this, what it was it was 2 men saying something. And what they were saying is, I don't care about my preferences. I'm going to treat everybody with compassion and respect. So Grandpa went to the garage and he got his probably 1976, 1977 Caprice Classic. Are y'all familiar with that car? I mean, it was one car, but it needs the equivalent of a 2-car garage today. And they got in the car, they drove across the street, they had the jumper cables, and this guy that would always give Grandpa a hard time, these 2 men got out of the car, they opened up the hood, they helped the guy jump his car, they drove back across the street and parked in the garage and sat back down in the lawn chairs outside in the front porch. And they just started talking as if nothing had ever happened. It was embedded in these 2 men that I'm going to put our preferences aside, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat everybody with respect and compassion. Now, I want you to know the world is going to tell you something different. The gospel is different than the world here. The world says, love those who love you. Love those who deserve it. Love those who agree with you. Love those who look like you. That's what the world's going to say, and it says it. Now, Christian doctrine, on the contrary, is to love the neighbor, to love the whole human race, all people, even the enemy, and not to make exceptions, neither of preference nor of aversion. The dream here is this, that we church and the collection of we house churches and all the individuals that make up both of them. Here's what I pray that we look like. I pray that this place is one day again filled with Democrats and Republicans, with the young and the old, with the evangelicals and the atheists, with Iowans and Nebraskans and Cubans, with rich people and poor people, with sinners and with saints. And even more so, what I pray is I pray that all these people together will say something like this: I don't care about my preferences. Like Jesus, I'm going to treat everybody with compassion and respect. All right, number 3. I don't care what other people think. I'm going to do what no one else is willing to do. So I don't care what other people think. I'm going to do what no one else is willing to do. So I'm blessed to know many successful people. Some of these are in business, some are in sports, some are in education, some are in the arts, and they all have one thing in common, and it's not talent. I don't even think it's perseverance. I think the thing that I see in every one of these successful people that I know is that they are willing to do what no one else was willing to do. Like, I love this story in the Gospels. You can find it in Matthew chapter 8. So it's important to know what happened in Matthew chapter 7 before we dig into chapter 8. So in Matthew chapter 7 and 6 before that and 5 before that, it's all one sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. It's the greatest, most prolific teaching that Jesus ever, gave humanity. And he would have been speaking to the masses from the mountains. That's what they call the Sermon on the Mount. And after he said these words were so prolific that everyone wanted to follow Jesus, and they were. So we pick up in verse 1 in chapter 8. Large crowds followed Jesus as he came down from the mountainside. Now suddenly a man with leprosy approached him and knelt before him. So the man said, Lord, if you're willing, you can heal me and make me clean. So I want to park here just for a second, okay? I'm going to read the next sentence because there's two sorts of healings that happen in this short little text, and the second healing is not as important as the first healing. So the first healing is this: Jesus reached out and touched him. Now, park that there for a second. I'm going to come back to it. The text continues. Jesus says, I am willing, be healed. And instantly, the leprosy disappeared. Then Jesus said to him, don't tell anyone about this. Instead, go to the priest and let him examine you. So I want to look at that text. So Jesus healed the man of his leprosy. That was like the healing that happened. The physical healing, you pray, okay. So leprosy, it's still a disease today. It's pretty much non-existent, but it's still out there. Leprosy is very treatable today. Back in the day, not so much. Now, there was two illnesses that anyone with leprosy would have had. Number two, and I would say the second biggest problem that someone with leprosy had is they had all these spots over their skin. And they had to deal with that. They had to live with that. But I would say this. I would say the most important affliction that somebody with leprosy would have had was that people would have just totally avoided them. They could have gone years or even decades without physically touching another human being. They would have been outcast because of their disease. Now, people can put up with some spots on their skin and some physical pain that goes along with that. People cannot put up with this type of terrifying isolation. So Jesus said, okay, your spots are going to be gone. Your skin is going to be as clear as a baby's bottom. But Jesus did something even better than that. Jesus did what nobody else was willing to do. Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man who hadn't been touched in forever. He said, you know what? You are fully human. I'm going to do what no one else is willing to do. I'm going to touch you. Now, I think about when I was in seminary in Atlanta, Georgia. So in seminary, you take all sorts of classes. And one of the types of classes you take is called contextual education. So the second year, you do this in your church, and you process it with other students, and you have a mentor in the church who processes it with you. And the first year, though, you have to do it in the community. So my group of 7 seminary students, we were all going to volunteer at the Atlanta Alliance for the Developmentally Disabled. So we had 7 people to choose from. Had kind of where they lived, what their issues were, kind of what their needs were, and I saw that one of the 7 was named Craig. I didn't look any further. I just said, okay, I'll take Craig. This one makes sense. So it turns out that Craig lived like in a very impoverished part of town. But Craig's, biggest issue was his IQ. I read through all this stuff. His IQ was like somewhere in the, like mid 70s, which means he's, pretty much nonverbal. Very tough for him to communicate. So, the professors, they would say, well, go down to the neighborhood, be there, get to know their culture, get to know their people. And I went there the first day and I said, hey, let me just kind of hang out here. And she goes, well, if you could, can you just take Craig away and then, bring him back? So if I did it once a week, it was 5 hours. If I did it twice a week, it was 2.5 hours. Oftentimes I would do it more. But this woman, like, she just needed respite. Sometimes she would clean the house, sometimes she would take a nap, sometimes she would go get groceries. Sometimes she would just do whatever she needed to do, and I was totally fine with that. I would take Craig to the house. We lived in Buckhead. I would take him to the church up in Marietta. We would go fun places. Craig couldn't go to the bathroom. I had to help him. If I didn't help him in time, I would, clean up the mess. It was by far the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life as far as work goes. Now, I'm not the hero of the story. I did this for 8 months for 5 hours a week. The heroes of the story are like Craig's sister that took Craig on. The heroes of the story are the men and women in Atlanta that volunteer for this organization, and they don't do it because they have to in a seminary class. They do it because they want to. They do it because they say something like, I don't care. I'm willing to do what no one else is willing to do. The heroes are the men and women that work this organization and do this incredibly challenging, tough job. Now let's look at this with our relationships. The problem with our relationships is we have a $1 million dream and a minimum wage ethic. Now, great relationships are only going to happen when we do what nobody else is willing to do. There at the church, we see this all the time. We have some men that volunteer at Release Ministries, and they do a Bible study in a jail. I think that's one of the toughest things that people do around here. I'm guessing every once in a while, there's going to be a kid that found himself in jail, and on a Wednesday afternoon, one of our guys went down there and they gave him a word from God. And I'm guessing that once in a while, one of these men is going to be part of somebody's testimony. And to me, that's really cool because they said, I don't care. I don't care. I'm going to do what no one else is willing to do. Our church was built by a team of men mostly. There's a few women that set up and tear down. They came early. They stayed late. And what they said is, I don't care what other people think. I'm willing to do what no one else is willing to do. Michelle and Chad talked a little bit ago about, reintroducing the age-level ministries, and these are tough jobs. Not a lot of us are willing to do these jobs, but I'm so grateful for those who say, I'm going to do whatever it takes. We have people that go to Uganda. We have house church leaders. This is not an easy gig. I hope we have more house church leaders in the future. We need more house church leaders in the future. You're making a commitment. You're doing something that there's a lot of people that are saying, I can't do that. And you're saying, you know what, I'm willing to do what other people aren't willing to do. Now, in relationships, look at how this works in relationships. You're going to listen before you speak because there's not many people who are willing to do that. You're going to seek to understand before you seek to get your point across because there's not many people who are willing to do that. You're going to do the little things that nobody is ever going to see, including the person that you're loving. You're going to give up what is easy for what is best. You're going to put the well-being of others before your own comfort and your own security. And when we do this, you're going to love like you have never loved before. Now, the dream here is that at the water's edge, we will have a countercultural revolution of our people doing the things in our church, in our house churches, in our community, in our families, everywhere we go, doing the things that nobody else is willing to do. Now, number 4, and the last one. I don't care about my need to be right. I forgive you. So for those of you keeping track at home, I don't care about my need to be right. I forgive you. I love this story from Mark chapter 2, and it's another story about healing. We're talking about caring for each other. It's a story about healing, and Jesus here gives us a glimpse of the most important type of healing that any of us and all of us can ever experience. I'll just read it and give you a few comments as I do. So when Jesus returned to Capernaum several days later, the news spread quickly that he was back home. So the house, or soon the house, where he was staying was so packed with visitors that there was no more room even outside the door. So again, all the people were crowded around Jesus. So then what happens next is they lowered a man on his mat right down in front of Jesus. Seeing their faith, Jesus said to the paralyzed man, "My child, your sins are forgiven." So I love this story. There's so much to love about it. So like all these people are with Jesus, he's teaching, he's healing. And then really like the unthinkable happens. Like they lowered, basically like they sawed a hole into the roof of this house and they lowered this paralyzed man down in this blanket. And they said, "Hey, Jesus, like heal this man." And Jesus says, "Not a problem." Now everybody there, everybody up on the roof, everybody on the floor, the man on the mat, they all thought the exact same thing was going to happen. You know, they thought this man needs healing, and they said, "Jesus, heal this man." And everyone was expecting Jesus to say, "Get up and walk," and he didn't do that. Jesus gave the man the healing that mattered most. He said, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now, this is like amazing stuff. You know, like we treat our like physical bodies like they're the most important thing, and Jesus, no, they're important. I mean, Jesus did tell the guy later to get up and walk. I mean, they're important, but there is nothing more important than our soul. There's nothing more important than our spiritual wellness. There's nothing more important than our relationship with God. The only relationship that we have that will last forever. There is no other except this one. Now, forgiveness, what it's going to do in your house churches, what it's going to do in your interpersonal relationship, what it's going to do in our church, what it will do then to our community that we live in is forgiveness. It's not going to change the past, but what it does is it enlarges our future. You know, church, I want to tell you this. The biggest act of compassion that we can give another human being is to look at them and to say, "I forgive you." To look at them and say, "I don't care about my need to be right. What I care about is us. What I care about is you, and I care about me. So I don't care about my need to be right. I forgive you." Now, my dream here is that in our house churches, we will model this for each other. We will model this for our children. You know, one of the things I hear is like, you know, I can't do a house church because I got kids. Well, you know, that's not right. Like, it makes no sense. I can't do a house church because I have kids and they're busy. The real language here should be, the vocabulary should be, because I have kids, I must do a house church. Because I'm going to model for them what it means to say, I don't care. I'm going to put aside my preferences. I'm going to put aside some of my security. I'm going to put aside some of my need to be right. And I'm going to live as a disciple in this world. And when the kid's no longer a kid, the kid will have the example of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ, because there is nothing more important than that. Jesus himself says, "What does it profit to gain the entire world but forfeit your soul?" There's nothing more important than your soul. So friends, let's be a church. Let's be families. Let's be house churches. Let's be individuals that quickly forgive, that freely forgive, that act like Jesus. And we say, "I don't care about my need to be right. I forgive you." So, friends, I want us to say these words a lot in the next weeks, the next months, the next years. I think we're going to need it in the next few months. It's pretty rough out in the world. Say these words. I don't care. I'm going to do what it takes to stay by your side. I don't care about my preferences. Me being compassionate and respectful to you is more important. I don't care about my need to be right. I forgive you. Like, this type of vocabulary, it will change a person. It will change a family. It will change a house church. It will change a church. It will change a city. It will change a state. It will change a country. It will change the world. Because Jesus, he himself says he came for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to seek and to save. He came to find and he came to forgive. So let us go to God and let us pray. Lord, I pray right now that we in the future together say many, 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 many times, I don't care. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what my belief is. I don't care that I've been hurt. I'm going to serve. I'm going to have compassion. I'm going to be beside others who are hurting. I'm going to forgive. Lord, I pray right now for house churches that are relaunching. I pray they do so with more fervor, with more focus than ever before. Lord, I pray for the leaders of these groups. I pray, God, that new house churches will form, from our church all over this area in Elkhorn and Gretna and Omaha and Ashland and wherever it is that people come from, that there'll be a house church for everybody. Lord, I pray for individuals, and I pray for those in relationships, and I pray for families that part of our vocabulary is I don't care, that we are going to do the things that we need to do, that we're going to be the people that we need to be to relate better to others and to relate better to you. God, I pray that, just like we talked about last week, that people will look at us and they will see a light on top of a hill of people who do things differently than the rest of the culture. And Lord, help us to follow you more closely. God, where your gospel challenges us, let us rise to the occasion and follow you more closely and just have more faith and more trust in you than we've ever had before. God, I pray for relationships that are in this church and relationships that are outside this church. Lord, may there be like an epidemic, even like a pandemic of like healing that happens. Lord, may we listen, may we learn, may we love as Jesus listened and as he loved and as he served and as he gave. So Lord, it's in one voice now that we pray the prayer that he, Jesus himself, taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.